When you're an entrepreneur with a great idea, it can be daunting to find funding. Startup Raven takes the process out of your hands by helping entrepreneurs connect and learn about potential investors all in one place, without any long-filled forms or 1,000 questions. Sign up for early access at Startuprad.io.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, and today I do have a startup here from lovely Switzerland. Grüezi Daniel, how you doing?
Grüezi, Joe. It's great to be here on the podcast with you, and I'm doing very well. Thank you.
My pleasure. You are the CEO and co-founder of board.Owl, meaning like the Nightbird Owl, based in Switzerland, and you're one of 3 co-founders. As always, we first go a little bit through your CV before we talk about the real startup. I have seen you attended the University of Greenwich in London and the Open University. How was it to go to university in London? I assume a little bit expensive?
Actually, back then, and I'm showing my age a little bit, it was not so expensive back then because it was still very much paid for by the state. So as you might hear from my accent, I am originally from the UK. I'm a mongrel or hybrid, depending on which way you see it. So a mix of Persian, British, and Swedish genes. And so studying in London was obvious for me. We'd spent some time in Switzerland before that as a family, had returned back to the UK, and university, is a bit of a mixed bag for me. So in short, I've done a fair bit of it, but I never concluded it. I did a year, managed to get a job in technology, which was meant to become a summer job, and they convinced me to stay on, paid me a lot of money because there weren't many tech people around then, especially ones who could speak German, and they convinced me to stay on. I tried to go back to university, but it just didn't. The business bug had bitten me, so I cut it off.
I see. And interesting thing is about Persian heritage, you can celebrate New Year twice a year, right?
That's right, with Nowruz. Don't ask me exactly when it is. It's coming up soon, but I always know because I receive a whole flurry of messages from my distant relatives.
The interesting thing is, first there's the official New Year, like January 1st. Then there's the Chinese New Year. And sometime after that, there's the Persian New Year. I have spent New Year in China, but I have totally no clue how the Persian New Year is celebrated. Maybe we get into that after the podcast recording.
Sure.
Talking about the jobs there, I've seen you've been a analyst in banking with a UBS, typical Swiss bank. Where have you been and what have you been doing there?
Sure. So my career started in technology, really, which was a bit of a legacy thing. My father was an engineer, first in the automotive industry and then transitioned into technology. He was working for UBS. He was always a big believer in not giving me things per se or money, but helping me with opportunities. So I spent 3 summers when I was a late teenager, when all my friends were at the beach or in the swimming pool. I was at UBS working over the summers in technology. And that was my first job there as well. It was as an external. I was an analyst, a very dry tech role, but it was the good foundations of what was to come later on. It got me the transition into the banking world.
And from there, somehow you moved on to Goldman Sachs, working in information technology, also an analyst, I do assume. What did you do and where? I assume London?
Actually, that was mainly based in Zurich. I traveled a fair bit, so spent a lot of time in London and in Geneva. It started out as a pure technology role. I was doing support, so I was rolling out, new software and things like that. then transitioned into more of a market data role, so linked to Bloomberg, Reuters, those kind of things to kind of feed all of the trading systems. And then finally, before I left, I transitioned into business analysis and project management.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, from there, somehow you turned a headhunter. How on earth did that happen? From an analyst in banking in Zürich to a technology analyst and then a headhunter. The next step for me would be logically either to go into VC or be a tech entrepreneur yourself. But how did you become a headhunter?
That's a very good question. And back then, I loved technology, but I was not that excited about how everything is bolted together. So I loved using it. I loved what technology can facilitate, but I didn't necessarily want to be in the trenches of technology anymore. I wanted to be using it. It was important to me to be on the front of a business. I knew I loved dealing with people. I was very interested in people. I guess I wanted to be front office, driving things forward, and being responsible for P&L. And it was just really through chance. So the company that had hired me into Goldman, into that tech role, was at the time a very specialized technology recruiter. They'd heard that I had left Goldman, and I'd decided to do that in order to seek a different path, I wanted to go into a smaller company or do something completely different. And they approached me with the proposition that I build up their financial recruitment and executive search business, which initially I laughed off, and then realized that actually it ticked pretty much all of the boxes I'd set, even though I hadn't thought of that as a career path.
Repeat what I learned about you so far is people yay, technology nay.
Well, no, I love what technology can do, but I don't need to be building it myself.
I see. And then somehow you went back into banking as in structured products, and then you went back to headhunting. How did this happen?
So what happened was headhunting is all about network and staying in touch, being proactive. And so I'd stayed in touch with many of my ex-Goldman colleagues and happened to be contacting one of them at the right time when they were about to build a new investment bank. So one that was actually one of the earliest fintechs I know. So it was really about building a technology platform to give clients the ability to self-price structured products with the use of derivatives and everything. And my first interaction with them was really to, as a headhunter, bring them in a number of people. And at some point, the CEO back then said, look, you're clearly a good salesperson because you've managed to convince a number of people to leave their blue chip firms and to join our little startup. Why don't you join us as well and help us build a company and sell structured products? And for me, it was always a bit of an unchecked mark. I slipped through the net into Goldman somehow without my completed university. But that was a barrier to me getting into those kind of derivatives sales or trading jobs. And so when that opportunity came knocking, I thought I'd give it a go. You'll see from my profile that I was there for a limited amount of time. It was about 9 months. And the reason for that was because it turned out to be not quite as fulfilling as I thought. I realized that, as you said earlier, people yay. I really do. I'm so interested in people. I love the fact that when you're working with the right companies who really value people as their number one differentiator, then you can have a real difference on those businesses, and you can have a real difference on the lives of the people that you hire into those companies. So that's why I moved back. And as you'll see, I at that point moved over to Dubai to set up the Middle East practice for my old employer.
And I assume it was a little bit too hot for you, because then you came back and co-founded the executive search company that actually you are still a part of, where the startup board.Daniel is a spin-off. But before we get into that, you also co-founded a school in Basel. How did this happen?
So, actually, as with board.Owl, and we'll get to that in a moment, I think, many people start businesses through scratching their own itch. And it was really that case with us as well. So my daughter's play school was bought up by a larger, I believe, private equity-backed group. It was previously a fantastic place, organic food and, wooden toys and a lot of connection with nature and things like that. And it turned into an awful place. So, half the staff fired and everything. And long story short, we decided that the time was just right to set up our own play school, pretty much for our daughter, and to build a business out of it. So we were fortunate that a couple of the very good carers from the old play school joined us there, as we didn't have the know-how. And of course, a number of the parents of the other children from the same place then also followed and became our first clients. And we were really able to build a wonderful place with very strong values connected to nature. And yeah, really, it's interesting actually looking at it that way, because I realized that, with my career of headhunting and focusing on people's path through their later stages in life, the addition of a nursery and daycare was actually not too dissimilar, but looking at it at a slightly different stage of life as well. So helping young children in their first steps of development early on.
I've heard people also aligning working with top management, working with a group of kindergarteners, but that's a completely different topic. And then you came back to Switzerland to co-found DART, the executive search you're still part of. And when I look into the background of your video, there is a snowboard. So I assume you moved back to Switzerland for the very simple reason that you got tired of water skiing and want to do some more real skiing. Little disclaimer here. I once tried in Texas, water skiing, and I was only diving.
Actually, I did love the kite surfing and wakeboarding and everything else that Dubai had to offer. But for me, for personal reasons, it was the right time to relocate to Europe. I was toing and froing really between London and Switzerland, but ultimately, yes, the mountains won. So you see my brand new snowboard, the latest one to my quiver, waiting there for its first ride right now. I love everything to do with boarding, whether it's snowboarding or other types, as well as paragliding, and spending time with my kids and both dogs.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into DART after a very short break. Hey guys, this is Joe from Startuprad.io. Today I want to introduce you to our newest partner, Newsly. Newsly is an all-in-one audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up the top trending articles on the web on topics you choose at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. We are also available there with all of our podcasts. Subscribe now and get 1 month off the premium subscription with the code StartupRad, STARTUPRAD on newsly.me. And we are back. So 13 years ago, you came back to Switzerland and co-founded an executive search company called DART. And can you talk a tiny bit about what you're doing in DART and how this sparked the idea of the board.Owl?
Yeah, with pleasure. So we're a boutique firm, DART. So we have our headquarters in Zürich. We have an additional team member in Barcelona, hoping to add 1 or 2 there as well. And DART itself is a highly specialized search firm. So we cover financial services only, and within that, even more specialized. So we cover private markets, so basically investment management, fintech, and family offices. how did we get to board.Daniel? Again, it was scratching an own itch. So about 7 or 8 years ago, so about 5 years into my journey with Dart, and at this point, at least to me, it still felt startups were not so cool, not regarded to be cool, and rather regarded to be pretty high risk. I was reaching a point where I felt I wasn't getting the company as far as I would like to get it, and I was missing some really high quality senior people. My big issue was that most of them were just too expensive, and they saw joining a small firm as just too high risk, and I wasn't going to pay them their banking salaries. So the solution for me at the time was to put together either a corporate board or an advisory board, because I realized that actually if I'm organized and prepared, then I would be getting most of what I was seeking from such a senior experienced person from just a few meetings per year. I just wanted to tap into their wisdom, into their expertise, into their life experience, and into their networks. And I didn't need to bring somebody into the company full time in order to do so. So we built an advisory board back then, because as a small growing company, it was a little bit daunting to have the idea of, perhaps reporting formally into a corporate board who might even potentially fire me. So it became an advisory board in the first step. And in short, the experience was fantastic. So in good times and bad, they proved to be excellent sparring partners, challenged me on various parts of the business. They brought expertise where I didn't have so much. I mean, I'm not an accountant or anything like that. So whilst I knew how to build up a business and how to generate revenues, various parts of that whole chain, billing and basically just improving the health of the business, I managed to get all of those insights from a very well put together, diverse board of people. And then the realization came, right, that I was not the only one who had kind of overlooked that previously, that there was this opportunity to really add a lot of wisdom and experience, expertise, perhaps even from other sectors, as I did it as well, into your business in a very cost-effective way. You don't need to employ lots of people. You can actually get a lot of that advice in-house in this kind of construct, either an advisory board or a corporate board. And then through our exposure to a lot of mainly senior executives through Dart's day-to-day business, and countless questions, whether we cover board mandates or not, which we did, just to a very small amount of volume. We just realized that there was a gap in the market. There was far too little transparency around boards. Most boards were really very one-dimensional and seemed to be more of a box-checking exercise rather than, leveraging them and using them for what they could be used. And there was just no flow, no transparency in the market, because most of these board positions were just going to family and friends of the company owners or founders. So the companies were missing out on a big opportunity, and many of these people who were willing to be part of doing something disruptive or something exciting were just not getting access to these opportunities because there was nowhere to find them. So that's really where the idea of board.Daniel was born. We realized we needed to change something on the traditional executive search model, because, of course, traditional executive search is a very white gloves approach. It's low volume, it's high touch, so it's expensive because it needs a lot of resources. And we felt that on a board level, given certain aspects to that, differentiators to executive search, that with the use of technology, we would be able to drastically reduce the price of that process and the involvement of human interaction to make it much more efficient and much more accessible and to have a bigger impact to many more startups.
So basically what you're trying to do is a semi-automated platform where startups can find the talent for supervisory board or an advisory board, and on the other hand, people with the right talent, with the right skills can be found by those companies or the other way around?
That's right, exactly. So first and foremost, we enable matching between those two sides. Then we educate both sides, because founders and company owners need to realize, need to learn not only about, the impact that a well put together board can have and what does a well put together board look like, but also many people who are looking to embark on their board careers, whether it's alongside their executive career, typically in an advisory board function, or whether they're in a second stage after their executive career looking to build a portfolio of corporate board mandates. Many people love the idea of being on a board, but they don't actually know what it means to be on a board. And so we help them learn about that. We run a number of workshops, also peer-to-peer networking sessions. And that leads into the third element of what we do, which is community building. So helping people to learn and grow together.
Mm-hmm. As you said, so a supervisory function, because we have to tell the people, so 80% right now listening to us are outside of Germany. And if they're inside of Germany, they may not necessarily have an idea of what a supervisory board is, but those members of the board, may it be a GmbH, an AG or something else, they're only there really to supervise on behalf either of the owners of the company, meaning if you have enough shares, you can put somebody on the board there. But also, if you're big enough, at least in Germany, there will be more and more people from the Works Council brought in. And actually, at the end, there will be an equal representation between the people who work for the company and the people who own the company. So as we said, it's a complete supervisory functions. They're all non-executives. They have the job to really look what the executives are doing on behalf of other stakeholders. That is a difference compared to the US, right?
That's correct. Yes. So I think you bring up a very important point. Boards can be very, very different, right? You bring up Germany. Germany is probably one of the most complex countries when it comes to boards, and there are lots of different types of boards. You've got the supervisory boards, you've got the power of the Workers' Council and their representation on the supervisory board. What we are not doing, certainly at this stage, is the executive board. So it really is all non-executives. The executive board typically is composed of operational people in the company. And that's what we're not doing. We are focusing on all of those around. So the big difference between the supervisory board and the advisory board is that the supervisory board really carries the responsibility and the liability for the company as a whole. And so it's a very formal setup. Countries vary massively in terms of, what the rules or what the responsibilities and the liabilities are of supervisory board members. But in most countries, it really is the case that they carry the responsibility. So they really have to, it's a governance function, right? They're overseeing the CEO and the CEO's executive team and making sure they're not doing anything bad, anything illegal, but also looking to steer them in the right direction. And the advisory board is much more of, as the name says, a sparring unit. So I would say the corporate board typically is more constant for a longer period of time. The advisory board, so advisory board members do not carry any liability or responsibility. They are there to help the founder team or the owner or the CEO to innovate, to break into new markets, to improve processes, but really as in a capacity as advisor. And actually, just on that note, I think many people don't know this, but if you look at, actually, I can't think of a single unicorn worldwide which does not have some form of advisory board. Alpha has one, Meta has one, at least one. that even, big health tech firms as well, like Moderna and stuff, they all have some form of advisory board or multiple advisory boards. Sometimes they're called scientific advisory boards. Sometimes they're regulatory advisory boards. But many companies have them. They're just not always that prevalent. With startups, they're very favorable, sometimes even preferable to supervisory boards, because with an advisory board, you can actually make yourself look more investable to investors, because you can show the caliber of the people you've got on board with you who believe in your product and are helping you build it. So investors will be very happy to see some high caliber or highly qualified advisors on your advisory board. And the other benefit is, whilst it should be a formal arrangement, a formal agreement, and we always advocate that they should be paid in some form, and there are multiple ways how that could be done. Early stage, you don't have much cash, so you can play with some equity or similar instruments. There is no, as we mentioned earlier, so no liability. And so that's reassuring for somebody getting involved with such an early stage startup. But it's also a little bit more relaxed for the founding team, who don't need to be, feel as though they're reporting to somebody. They're rather, counting on an advisory board to help them.
I would actually think of an advisory board as getting a lot of very senior consultants for a very cheap price. Not necessarily that they have been consultants in the past, but they do have a certain know-how with which they can help you as a founder.
There is some truth to that. Yeah, I don't like to use the word cheap because, and actually in some cases you'll see that, especially where equity is involved, an advisory board or advisory board members can do very well out of their contribution to a startup. And what's interesting is that, normally as the link is being created, compensation is high up there on the agenda, and it should be. People should be fairly rewarded for their added value and input. But it's so interesting to see that already quite soon after their involvement or joining an advisory board, the feedback we get about what they get out of it themselves. I mean, they don't just feel, they learn so much from the other advisors on the board, from the founders themselves, what it means, the trials and tribulations of startups and everything, that at some point everybody's in it because they're just loving being part of it and really, get also put in blood, sweat and tears. I think, I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit more tactical. It's a bit more short term. You can change your advisory board as the company develops, and you should, because at a very early stage, you'll need different skills and input than you will at a later stage. But I would differentiate it very much from the consultants that you mentioned, because consultants come in, do a job and get out, and they don't see things through, whereas your advisory board will be with you for some time and share that responsibility for things working out.
Mm-hmm. I would be interested. We've now talked such a lot about the use of boards for potential startups and companies. How does it actually look for the people who would like to go there? Basically, my understanding is right now, you find board.Owl some way. For me, it took a little trip to Barcelona at the EU Startup Summit last year spring to actually find you guys. And then you have to register. My understanding is you are required to take some classes to become a board member, and then at one point you as a person will be matched with a startup. Is that about the process you're working with right now?
Kind of, yeah. So at the moment, we do not require you to take any of our courses because some people who join the platform are already highly experienced board members. We do encourage it for those people who have not yet sat on boards, either advisory boards or corporate boards. And we also work with some educational partners, some well-known business schools to whom we get, or with which we get access to their more heavy-duty board modules as well. But basically, the process is the following. So you find us, you start the sign-up process. As part of that, and this is where the technology bit comes in, so that this algorithm works, you build your profile. It's self-assessment at the moment. This is going to be changing quite soon as we're changing the model to be predominantly by invite. So members inviting other members and vouching for them. Right now, you can still get onto the platform if you don't know another member. We will keep that door open, but it will be a slightly higher hurdle going forward as we're growing quite quickly. And you fill in you basically do a self-assessment. So you have a limited number of points that you can allocate yourself in 3 key areas, 3 key categories. One is your sector and functional expertise. The other one is your geographical expertise. And finally, but an element we find very, very important, also your personal traits and values. So we think that those are equally important to making sure that you get the right fit between a board member and a company owner or the other board members. There's a few other things that you can select. So you can basically narrow down what opportunities will come your way. So you can say how many days you're available per year, whether you're interested in what type of startups or firms that you would be interested in being on the board of, compensation preferences and things like that. And then, following a short call with one of our founding team, just to kind of verify everything and give you some tips on how to hone your profile further. You're then live on Board Owl's platform and part of its community and have access to all of our document library, guides on compensation, things like that, and access to all of the peer-to-peer networking sessions in person and online, and ultimately are matchable. So as opportunities come up, and Hedwig, our wise owl, matches you with opportunities, you will be notified.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. For the entrepreneurs out there right now listening, can you give us a tiny bit of an overview? What kind of people are right now registered as potential supervisory advisory board members here on Board Owl in Switzerland? Is it mostly focused Europe? Is it mostly focused DACH or GSA region? Or do you get people from all over the world here?
We actually have people from all over, which initially wasn't, well, it's always been the plan, but it wasn't it basically happened a lot sooner than we expected. So that's happened partially through some very strong collaborations with some startup incubators and accelerators, the likes of F10, Seed Stars, in which we were educating startup founders on boards and how to put them together. And then many of them got on the platform and thought it was a good idea and sought their advisory board members and corporate board members. One thing led to another. And today we have members on our platform we are still very, very, I would say very focused on pretty nearly half of our platform is based in either Switzerland or Germany. And the rest equally spread across UK, US, Asia, and in certain cases, Middle East and Africa as well. You asked about the types of people as well. Sorry, I nearly forgot that. So with Board Owl, we have decided that given the fact that you can learn so much from different sectors, it was by design that we decided to go completely, all sector. And we have members on our platform representing pretty much any sector you can imagine. We have people who have been in consulting up to a very senior level and have advised CEOs of large companies on key strategic topics. We've got people who have worked for some of the largest blue chips and developed strategy for them in CEO roles, CFO, COO. We have people from venture capital and private equity who have invested in companies and helped them scale and can advise founders on how best to fundraise or how best to build their teams as they grow. We've got people from technology, ex-CTOs, or current software developers who can also provide input from that side. We have people from the fashion industry who have worked for the likes of Gucci and Prada. We have people from healthcare, global head of risk, ethics and compliance for one of the largest pharmaceutical firms. I mean, it's really that broad and diverse. Strong emphasis on tech, as many companies look for tech nowadays. There's usually some kind of tech element to most startups, but generally really cross-sector.
Mm-hmm. I see. Everybody who'd like to learn more, they can go down here in the show notes. They will, of course, have your LinkedIn profile as well as the website of board.Owl. And to close up this interview, we have our two usual questions. Of course, first, are you open to talk to external investors?
We are, and timing of our call is excellent. People might be listening to this even in the future, so always open to talk. And right now, especially as we're just in the process of closing our seed round, we have a actually Berlin-based venture capital fund who has joined the round, which is great, and a number of other sort of smart money investors from the HR tech space. So yes, always open to talk to people who would like to be part of our journey and help us have a strong impact in the success of startups globally.
Mm-hmm. And are you guys currently hiring?
We are, and here as well, we are always open to great talents, whether it's in Zürich, where the headquarters is, in Barcelona, or anywhere in the world, actually, as we all embrace this sort of flexible working setup.
Mm-hmm. I see Zurich or Barcelona, snowboarding or water skiing, right?
You've seen through me. Seriously.
I see. Daniel, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. All the best, and let us know when your seed round is closed. And of course, we'll have it in our startup news.
Thank you, Joe. It's a great pleasure. It was a great pleasure to talk to you today, and look forward to speaking again before too long.
Pleasure was all mine. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.Startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.